Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest version of Tales from Outer Space, where I take an HFY story from somewhere around the internet and read it aloud for your enjoyment. All the relevant links are down below. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube comf to help this video and channel grow. Anyways, as always, I hope that you enjoy. I would just like to thank the following Tier 5 patrons and channel members for supporting the channel: Datamagnet and Bob the Dragon. Thank you again. And now, on to the story. The Study of Humanity, written by InferiorVenom. I am often asked by my friends, family, journalists, and even my fellow xenoanthropologists why, of all the races to study, I choose to focus so much of my time on humanity. Some ask why I would waste my time on such a young species which has contributed almost nothing to core galactic politics or culture. Others ask why I would risk my personal safety deliberately associating with one of the most savage and widely feared races ever encountered. And yet others are genuinely curious as to why I choose to study such a wonderful and vibrant species. In truth, the disparity in the tone of these questions is itself part of the reason why I chose humanity. For just about every race in the galaxy, there is some event in their history, some aspect of their culture that you can point to as a golden example of the species. It may not have to display every aspect of the race, but it neatly summarizes the key features of their role in the galactic community, providing insight into how best to interact with them from a political standpoint, or how best to engage with them from a military one, or how best to approach an economic issue with the merchants. Take the Hoitzical Collective's arrival in the world of Krakavar 4. The world was split between two sentient species, both having evolved separately on each of the world's hemispheres, both on the brink of developing Tier 3 civilizations, and as a result, resources were beginning to become sparse. War had raged between the two races for centuries when the Hoitzical arrived in system, originally planning to colonize it. Upon seeing the political state of the two pre-space age races, they immediately began meeting with leaders of both species. With their natural empathic abilities, they were able to make tailored suggestions that appeased both parties. They provided the means to boost their floundering economies and emphasize the need to share. Within 5 solar cycles, not only had they ended a centuries-long war, but the two races were now firm allies, working together to make the best use of the world's resources to benefit them all. Even after the Hoitzical departed, the two races continued to advance exponentially and reached a Tier 4 civilization and developed space travel within 100 cycles, faster than any other race in recorded history. This example is often used to highlight the incredible diplomatic skill of the collective, and why they sit at the head of the United Galactic Republic. Another textbook example is that of the Throngar's role in ending the Great Zilarixic Plague. Everyone who knows anything about galactic history knows how close many of our races came to extinction when that horror crept into the Outer Rim. The Zilarixic hives have always been a terrible danger, and the reason much of that region remains uninhabited. The massive organisms that act as the hive ships prowl the regional space looking for any world rich in organic matter. When they find one, they birth countless feeder organisms to descend on the world and devour it all. When there is nothing left to devour, they move on, traveling to the next system and leaving nothing living behind. As terrible as they were never a truly galactic threat, lacking any kind of FTL or hyperspace technology in their entirely organic fleets. The vast majority of resources acquired from the latest feeding were expended by the hive in its sometimes century-long journeys between star systems, leaving them just barely strong enough to consume what they found there. Overly successful hives inevitably burn themselves out as they consume all the available biomatter around and starve themselves. That all changed, however, when the Kylar began colonizing that regional space. Breeding rapidly, they were able to fill 12 systems with trillions of inhabitants before the hive found them, Unprepared for the attack, the first colony world fell, and the immense amount of bioresources the former inhabitants provided gave the hive more than enough power to rapidly consume the next two systems before the Kyler would intercept them with their colonial defense fleet. As powerful as the fleet was, it was no match for the now engorged hive, and every single crew member of the fleet was consumed, fueling the hive even further. By the time the Kyler were able to evacuate their remaining colonies, it was too late. The hive had amassed enough resources to cross the great natural gulf that exists between that sector and the galaxy at large. With such rich, new feeding grounds, the hive grew and spread exponentially, cutting a bloody swath towards the galactic center. Entire subsectors of the Empire were lost, countless souls were devoured, and a few races were even lost their ancestral homeworlds. Entire armies and armadas were arrayed against them, but the hive's innumerable hordes were too many and too great to stop. It seemed that the galaxy was doomed. Then the hives encountered the Throngagar. No race before or since has so reveled in war. Considered little more than barbarians by many, the Throngagar's entire culture has always focused around the honor and glory of combat. Even their religion preaches the eternal rewards for death in combat. Since entering the galactic stage, the Throngagar had been forced to keep their bloodthirsty natures in check by economic sanctions and embargoes by their neighboring empires, warning that unprovoked attacks would result in the loss of vast majority of their economic income, and the slow, undignified death of their fledgling empire. But when the Zilazek attacked, at last the Throngagar could let their true natures free. Here, at last, was a conflict that was mercifully simple. There were no political games, no negotiations or treaties, no rules of war. There was only the battle for survival, which only one could win. The Throngagar struck like a meteor, sending the hive reeling from their system. Time after time, the hive tried to pass through the Throngagar-controlled space, and time after time, they were repelled. The Throngagar held the hive at bay for so long that the other races were finally able to recuperate and muster a combined fleet strong enough to finally push the Zilazak back. Finally, the plague was ended and the hive was forced back to the black pit it crawled out of. To this day, the Throngagar continue their campaign against the Zilazak, hunting them throughout the sector and reveling in the glory of their own personal, never-ending war. This landmark of galactic history shows above all else why the Throngagar are respected as the mightiest warriors in the galaxy. The examples are as numerous and as varied as the races of the galaxy themselves. From time to time, the mercantile cunning of the Orcs allowed them to trick two empires out of half of their colonized worlds, to the brutal savagery of the Vorkalon's massacre on Tyon Prime. The nature of every race can be summarized neatly if you know your history. But what best summarizes humanity? This is a question that drew me to study them over any other race, and one that I've struggled to answer for years. The Quaxar would tell you that they are a terrifyingly vengeful race, as highlighted by their response to the destruction of one of their colony transport fleets. 12 million humans died in that attack. And so, humanity responded by obliterating a dozen of the Quaxar's occupied worlds, even after the Quaxar sued for peace after the third attack. The Throngagar will tell you humanity is deceitful, dishonorable race, as shown by the decisive battle of only conflict between two empires. When the Throngagar's fleet arrived in the system housing the humans' primary manufacturing facilities for the region, they found it suspiciously empty of ships. It was only when they drew close enough to the system center that the humans showed their hand. A stealth cruiser fired a volley of specialized fusion bombs into the system's star, generating a massive series of solar flares that crippled the Throngagar's fleet. They were helpless as the human fleet, which had been hiding in the system's outer asteroid field, descended upon them. And then there's what the Hoitzicals say, and the main reason humanity were welcomed into the galactic community. According to them, humans are the most honorable and noble of races. Only a few decades after first contact, when humanity was still considered insignificant to the galaxy, a Hoitzical civilian fleet came under attack by pirates. They sent out a distress call, but the only fleet close enough to aid them was the human fleet, and a merchant one at that. Despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed, the humans rushed to their aid, fighting off the pirates and even shielding the civilian craft with their own ship's hulls while they escaped. The merchant fleet was completely destroyed, and all hands lost. But the Hoitzical fleet was able to reach safety and eventually send a Republic fleet to the region to bring the pirates to justice. So we have a race that is simultaneously ruthlessly vengeful, determined to win at any cost, and compassionate enough to lay down their lives for others. And there are countless more stories, each displaying humanity in a different light. And each of them, after investigation demanded by skepticism, appears to be accurate and true. Some will say that this only proves the defining trait of humanity is that they are multifaceted, and as such, untrustworthy. I, however, have a different theory. The defining feature of humanity is that they defy being defined. Honorable, vengeful, merciless, heroic, cunning, compassionate. Every human and humanity as a whole is all of these things and more, and yet none of them at the same time. No other race has ever displayed such a variety of character, not just within the species as a whole, but within each individual. So when I am asked why I study humanity over any other race, I simply tell them, because for me, there is no other race worth studying. Warrigar Jusico, leading xenoanthropologist expert on humanity, upon being asked why study humanity. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.